Super quick and say welcome everyone to The Word Is Changed. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We got a bunch of other great things coming up that I'm just going to direct you to the website or the Instagram for. I normally bring up a stack of books to like prompt me on what to do. So we'll hold up one, The Diversity of Aesthetics, which was a series of journals. The last one, which was like looking on looting with Christina Sharp and bunch of great other things. It's now 3 volumes in one, so we're going to have discussion on that coming up in September. Films on Palestine. We are a member, a supporter of PAC-B, the Palestine Academic Cultural Boycott of Israel. There's flyers on your chair for a fundraiser for Gaza coming up this weekend. And also in terms of raising funds, some of the books today, Joy was able to get some copies of The Fabulous In Pursuit of Revolutionary Love, and we're trying to pool all the money and raise some money for Prison Radio, which is an essential organization for getting Mumia and many other people that are locked away and need to be out here with us, their voice out into the world. So if you don't have the money for the book, or you have the money for the book and you want to kick some more money in for Prison Radio, just tell us that when you're checking it out and we'll make it all happen. So thank you so much for letting me introduce this in flow. And now, man, I'm so glad you are here. This is going to be fabulous. Thank you.
Aw, Alexander. Clap for Alexander. Okay, so we don't have an official formal structure. It's very fluid, so roll with us. So I want to read an excerpt. Is that okay, Joy? It's not okay. Well, it's coming. Here we go. So the excerpt from the new book, Confronting Counterinsurgency. This book offers some strategies and wisdom about global freedom struggles. Anti-colonial and anti-imperial freedom movements are intimately familiar with betrayal, death, and mourning. This book project is a study guide. I'll run that back. This book is a study guide and revolutionary manual shaped by the conversations and reflections of analyses of Maroons. We care for each other even when we do not agree. And we push ourselves forward to more deeply connect with liberation movements. We scrutinize our failures and flaws. We materialize and show up as caretakers, protesters, movement makers, Maroon engineers, war resistors, and sanctuary stabilizers, seeking and demanding protections for all life forms. That's page 3 of the introduction. And so, grounding us in the text, my question for you, Joy, is what moment were you writing into when you wrote that? And the part 2, what is the moment that we are currently in now?
Yeah, greetings. I mean, I really appreciate hearing you sing. And I think, part of answering the question, is the mic on? Can you hear me?
Yes. Bring it up closer to you.
Okay. So much about your singing reminded me of abandonment, and that what you were singing were against it. The isolation, the loneliness, particularly people who are ethical and try to change a world that has been contaminated by predators. Right? And so I would say that any of the writing or all of the writing is a response to what you were singing. And there's not always an answer to every question, but there's always an attempt to be honest and brave, right? And sometimes the play of singing allows, to reveal parts of yourselves about the loneliness in struggle. So even though you have a collective, at times, and even though your collective didn't abandon you, or like, and sometimes with me, I just got kicked out. This is how but there's a way we can knit ourselves back together. And so some of the words that you were saying was this whole concept of the captive maternal that I've been trying to figure out for over a decade, but it always said it was function, right? It was an identity. And so I, pissed some people off because they think I'm anti-Black feminist, and I'm not saying that I am, and I'm not saying that I'm not a Black feminist. I'm just saying that these mutations are what we are. Because, as the predator preys, you have to shift and move to evade the violence. And then you have to decide if you have the capacity to quell the predator or to take them out. And most of the times we don't even conceptualize about taking them out, which is fine with me. But the pain that comes from the violence, from the state, from the POTUS, somewhere in here, you're reading from the most recent, you're reading the most recent book from Pluto. We did 4 anthologies with Pluto, and they're all collective. It's not one person doing this, right? So the stages that you talk about, the captive maternal, it's the caretaking, right? Then I'm thinking of 2020 as well, and 2014, and all the origin stories of death and loss of the child's life, right? Or Brianna's life, or there's this whole list of losing people. And we know that despite the height of struggle, which was global around George Floyd, police have killed more civilians and they got more money for killing. And so it's not just the fear, the abandonment, the violence, it's the betrayal that's baked into the democracy. So the stages are the only way that I can stabilize. It would be great that if you can stabilize with kin or family, but sometimes you have to leave the biological family because it's not safe. Or they start voting for Trump or something weird shit. And so what we land into is the song. If we never see each other again, somewhere in the recesses of our mind, we remember that what we sang about what we are becoming, despite the violence that's arrayed against us. So the stages, again, the caretaking in the home or beyond it, the protests when you realize that the family, the nuclear family, it doesn't have the power, the stability, and it also has a deep contradictions, right? Caretaking, protests, the movement 2020, before 2020, 2014, after 2050, we'll still be doing these protests about police killing, or the CCOT, putting people in El Salvador, or, flying Haitians to Sudan or to language. They don't know the language. How are they supposed to survive? The point of the cruelty is that they're not, right? So in the stages, right, to the movement, I believe that I participated in all 3 stages. And the only stage that I'm really focused on right now would be Maranaj, which is not a flight or abandonment or betraying movement. It's just understanding that the movement has been infiltrated, that there's hard counterinsurgency from, predator POTUS, but there's this soft counterinsurgency. I'm not here to piss you off, but I'm old enough to say what I want to say. Where the money floods in to the nonprofit, and the money comes from white corporations that work with the DNC, right? And I'm not saying don't take the money, but just know what a Trojan horse is, and don't be surprised if it ends up on your front yard. So Maranaj is where I would want to be, but I'm afraid that loneliness will come with the Maranaj. And when I think of Maranaj, I think of Steff Reed, the Brazilian Black woman who was enslaved, who started a slave revolt in 1826 and dealt out the Europeans. And then if you wanted her, you would have to find her in the forest. And if you went into the forest to find her, you may not come out, right? So we have ancestors. When we were watching the Maisleys film last night, a documentary on Queen Mother Moore and then one on George Jackson. They were like, we have in our lineage, not the biological family per se, but the spiritual and the political family, we have all these gifts. The question is how we carry them, right? Care, protest, movement, marnage, and then sanctuary. And sanctuary is something I've rarely seen. And I don't even know the longevity. I mean, when you think of the quilombos, when you think the marnage, when you think that the first time the U.S. Military was defeated, it was with the Seminoles in Florida because they understood the land. So it was the indigenous who partnered with the Africans or black people who were enslaved, who fled. And when the U.S. military came for black people to bring them back into enslavement, the indigenous said no. Black people said no. And the U.S. Army was defeated. Now that's not a defeat that we could maintain throughout the centuries. But if you've defeated them once, you know, what the ancestors say is they don't lie. The capacity to give us life, the capacity to protect us, it's not only on the material plane. But sanctuary would be good right now. It would be nice. I'm not sure it's possible, but for me that would be the sweet spot. And so what I was trying to write about was how even as we fight, we move like water. That we're always in constant movement in the stages, and also we will retreat. There will be defeats. You move to like sanctuary and they burn it down. You move to sanctuary and they have a drone strike and they blow it up. But then you build another sanctuary. And like I've said before, I mean, I grew up in a military environment. I mean, that's what trained me. And I've said before, I've been ROTC. And then, you know, I was shooting guns when I was a teenager. It wasn't a big deal. It was actually expected. But I think I like that film, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, we talked about the other night. Like, you can infiltrate the CIA, supposedly in the narrative, free men, right? And then you take the skills back to the community. But I think there's a tripwire on here, or a Trojan horse. I'm sorry, like all these friggin' metaphors. Like, I know she said that one and that one. I don't know what she's talking about. The state is incredibly sophisticated because the state studies us. And the state wins a lot, if you call it a win, because of our heightened fear. And so we feel that we have to belong to some entity. So I'm not gonna, I work for elite colleges. I'm not better than anybody else who holds a job. But I understand the people in the college who deeply dislike me and would like me to disappear. And so I have no fantasy or no imagination that whatever I'm doing is with my students. I'll put a caveat on this. Whatever I'm doing with my student is trying to be ethical and truthful. But I'm not trying to change academia. I mean, you already saw it collapse like dominoes. It's just a minute, like, we're taking your money. It's like they still have billions of dollars. They all have billions of dollars. Harvard has billions. My college has billions. I mean, they're a college, so they don't have tons of billions, right? All these schools have money, but the thought of not having as much money as they used to have eviscerated all ethics. These are not zones of ethics. They're not zones of truth-telling. And the only thing I'm saying, I'm not going to go through a laundry list of like, this is a good nonprofit and this is a bad nonprofit. I'm just going to say, it's, you know, nonprofits are cousins of academia. Right? And so there may be like that we say to ourselves, well, we're not really doing something horrible, or we are doing the best we can. But if you get in a Trojan horse, or if one rolls over you, there is no sanctuary and there's never Maranaj. The Maroons ran knowing that they would be hunted and killed. Other people say, we're staying on the plantation, we understand, we're going to be violated, we're going to be raped, we're going to be beaten, we're going to be worked, almost to death, but that's safer than running into the wilderness and fighting for freedom. And that was kind of what George Jackson was saying when it's like, 7 years in solitary confinement. What I understand, they brought a blowtorch and welded the gates on his cell shut. And then he became a mutation because you have a psychic breakdown. That was the point, right? And maybe he'd off himself. He never offed himself, the state did. But what he became, reading Mao, reading Fanon, reading Lenin, reading, Malcolm, reading, on and on. He became someone who loved so deeply that death was not a zone of fear. It was a zone of familiarity. And I'm not there. I don't plan ever to get there. But when I see someone who can do that, it is 180 from the nonprofit. And that's okay. If this is how you pay your bills, I pay my bills. I get Blue Cross Blue Shield. Family needs medical, so I'm gonna hook it up. So I don't try to pretend I don't know what people project on me. Sometimes it's a lot of anger. Other times it's like, oh, celebratory. It means something, but it doesn't register emotionally that much. What registers is whether or not we have function and capacity. That's for me, that's the sweet spot. If we can move without people predicting every move we're going to make, that's a zone of possibility. That's a Sepharina move, a black young woman who's like, I'm done with the slave stuff. We're going to have a revolt. Y'all are going to follow me. We're going in the forest. If they follow, good luck for them if they ever think they'll get out. Right? That's our lineage. The question is if we want it. And I would say most nonprofits, most academic, most working for the state, most campaigning for Democratic Party. And I voted for Molly, voted for Obama, and I run the whole numbers up and down. But the people who they're not satisfied with that, those are the people who I find incredibly interesting because I think they're a mutation.
Ooh, Dr. James. So I hear you talk about fear and I hear you talk about death. And in the car right here, we talked about the distinctions maybe between courage and risk taking, which then, as an artist, I want to bring in Nina Simone, who, when they asked her what freedom is to her, she says, no fear. So last night, I was watching an interview you did where you said, we're playing chess in hell. There's no winnable game inside this game on the Design Gym panel series, Beyond the Binary, a few months ago. So it makes me think of something about the enclosure in Maranaj, that far too many people are concerned with assimilation, holding on to the enclosure, but the true chance for liberation is in Maranaj. So one of my grounding quotes all the time is Tony K. Bambara, who said the role of the cultural worker is to make revolution irresistible. How do we make Maranaj irresistible, or at least a feasible option, as opposed to perceived comfort in the enclosure?
I think that's a good one because often whatever we build, somehow it gets co-opted. Mm-hmm. Somebody does what you build comes out of not just your sweat, but out of your desire and your dreams, and it costs. And then you're like, okay, it's almost like giving birth right here. Like we birthed this organization, we birthed this tax, and all these tax are collective, like I said, and all the revenues, they don't come to me or anybody else. They go back into getting more books that can go into the community. So it's supposed to be a cycle that keeps going. I think Okay, what's the difference between, okay, I'm sorry, my brain's glitching. Okay, so there used to be, when I was walking around in Manhattan, sometimes, you know how people have a blanket on the concrete and then they're selling things, and they're selling like what's supposed to be Prada or something, but like it was really just, they stitched it like, 6 blocks down the street. So how do you know an authentic piece of work as opposed to a knockoff? Right? Like this bag you think is going to be well done, it's going to fall apart in like a week or two. Because it's not what you think it is. You're being sold goods that are not, well, it's what you deserve. You deserve stability and quality. You deserve a stable life that has quality and kindness within it. But if what is being sold to you is a life that is really shrunken and really dry and barren, but they promise you fertility that is never going to happen because nothing grows. Nothing organic grows there. It's dead. Then what you get is a knockoff. You get the plastic version. And you can, it's got the label and it can say like, I belong to this label, the label belongs to me. And that becomes an identity marker, but it's not stable. I would say that over decades, the state figured out how to engineer bad goods and to sell it back to us. For whatever reasons, and I'm in academia, I'm in academia and I've been in it for decades. And I've known all the key academics. We used to roll, and then I guess I got kicked out. I don't know. What we ended up with is a hybrid of the state's plan and our desire to be free. Once the state plans your freedom, trust me, you're not free. But we went for the knockoff because it was cheaper. We didn't have to risk. It's right there on the street, on the sidewalk. And it was like, instead of like $500, you could get it for $5 and call it a bargain. And I don't think it's, quote, our fault inherently, but the state is good at what it does. I mean, you just can't drone strike everybody. You just kill their desires to be free. And then you don't have to kill them physically.
So I want to just, bless you.
Bless you.
I want to raise some quotes from Confronting Counterinsurgency. The chapter that really resonated with me the most was the one with Professor Abdu from Columbia. So there's this quote, it says, "You don't have to kill someone to destroy them or to destroy their family." And then there's, here we go. "The left has become so antagonistic to this question of spirituality," on page 44. And again on page 44, Kwame Ture had noted, "You can't be revolutionary without being religious." Then we have the examples of Nat Turner. We have the examples of Malcolm X, of Martin Luther King Jr., and so many others. The embodiment of a political theological social justice project, in my humble opinion, is founded in all faiths. So I think what's really coming up for me is like, you're talking about artificial and things can be copied and, counterinsurgency. I'm wondering, what is, in your estimation, the role of faith and spirituality in this project of insurrection, of counter-hegemony, of raising consciousness and giving people maybe hope and faith and moral courage to actually rise up and to divest and find liberation through like breaking away? Like how can we think about that? And especially as someone who's a former seminarian.
Yeah, I mean, we went to the same seminary, years apart.
Yeah.
Okay. he gets to say woo. I left early. Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to work with Dolores Williams and James Cone and Cornel West as an advisor. But I left because the structure of the seminary is like the structure of academia, right? There wasn't the kind of nourishment I thought there would be. And I could be wrong, but it seems to me that the business side of business seems to seep into all forms of educational structure, because that's what it needs to do, because it's always a land grab, right? Even if the land is your mind and your spirit. And so I don't talk about faith. Maybe I should talk about it more. And I wouldn't say that I don't have faith. This is going to sound sacrilegious and shit. I'm going to get like lightning when I walk out. I don't need it. I mean, there's nothing that's going to change the trajectory that I'm on. Like, there's nothing that's going to change the trajectory of the pose. I mean, you reach a point, there'll be a point of, collision or capture or disappearance or whatever, or depression, who cares? I mean, once you are on your path, you're on your path. And it would be nice if it was going to be softened and people actually cared about you or something like that. That's nice. That's like icing on the cake, but it doesn't matter where the icing comes or it goes, right? So like, there's a kind of sweetness to it because you are the faith. It's not an exterior thing outside of you. The fact that you organize, the fact that you sign the songs, the fact that you struggle, the fact that you have ethics, you are the faith. People see what you do and they have faith because they see you doing it. So I still think that our level of fear is incredibly high, but we don't address it because we may not be aware about how frightened we are. And because I think we're trained, so in the military, what you're trained to do is to take people out before they take you out. It's really simple. It's like a game. It's not that complicated, right? But then you have to admit that that's what you're trained for. Does that make sense? I mean, though, like patriotism and all that stuff. When I last looked, 3 veterans commit suicide every day. If it was that patriotic, they wouldn't be going out that many, right? My dad went out at 55 as a lieutenant colonel. People don't last long if they don't accept the conditions of struggle. I mean, it's when you sugarcoat it or you do a makeover. I was always watching those, it's been my addiction right now. There's British, let's redo a renovation on a castle. I was like, fine, there's no black people here. You never have black people's homes. They don't buy castles. So it's just such an abstraction. It's like sci-fi for me, right? But at the end, it's like this pristine house. It's like a moat or something. It's like, it's a life you'll never live, or I'll never live. But there's something about the possibility of redoing reality, if that makes sense. And so our possibility of redoing reality has a huge capacity. I just don't know if we want to engage in that capacity. I don't know if we want distraction. And when I say we, I'm including me. That I want to be distracted, and then I start thinking about, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, right? But like some of the language that we use, like this confidence we will win, and then I'm like, okay, what's your definition of winning? Like George won. Like I think about George every week, and it's like I never met him, right? And the way he went out is like, you know, people were like, oh, that tells you always obey the state, like da-da-da. And then it's like, he went out a free man. Now I have to rethink, what is the cost of freedom? And when I talk to people who are in the party, and the Panthers I talk to are Harlem people, they're not West Coast, except for maybe Geronimo Pratt, who actually got a Purple Star in Nam, which you get that for not good things, right? But he brought his skills back to the States, right? And he was betrayed by Huey. Huey set him up, and that's why he did 27 years. When I said before to a prominent historian, the same number of years that Nelson Mandela did, the historian was like, how dare you compare those? Like, okay, because Nelson is like an attorney, and he says all the right things, and he has a liberal vibe. And then Geronimo is like a street soldier, foot soldier, right? So what I'm trying to say is, we've layered so much on our struggle. Outside people have layered so much on our struggle. I wonder, when we look in the mirror, what are we seeing? Are we seeing ourselves on the level of risk and love so that we can tunnel out? Or are we seeing ourselves mystified, and so you don't see the Trojan horse rolling up into your driveway? And once you're captured, it's much more difficult to get out, right? Not saying you can't, but how you get out and the cost to get out is deep. The nonprofits are a zone of capture. Why would Jeff Bezos give $100 million to Van Jones? I always talk about them because you like everybody else. So I'm assuming you don't like them. So I'll just use them as an example. But there's a lot of people on the list, you know. And you don't have to hate them, you don't have to be mad at them. It's just, you're going to have to undo the analytic that you can get $250,000 to be a Freedom Scholar from the DNC, from the Fitzgers, right? Penny was the one like trying to run Harvard, didn't work. And then her brother's the governor of Illinois, and they're the leadership of the DNC. And then the other ones are the Casey Foundation, which made their $1 billion taking black children from poor families through foster care, because you monetize black kids every time you take them in the house, because there's no food in the fridge, because you won't give the parents enough food to feed their kids, right? So then it's like, if you're going to get into the Minotaur's maze and not get gored, you have to figure out a way out. We got into the maze and we didn't have a strategy to get out. So we're dependent on the money. Like I'm dependent on the college. So that's why the underground, that's why the Maroons, they're the only people that interest me now. It doesn't mean I don't understand that people are suffering, like a middle class. My people eat in the home. I know there are people who don't eat. I know people who are being hunted by ICE. I know people being deported. There's people incarcerated. So I'm privileged in some real ways. But I wake up wondering, like, how might we get out? My confusion or sadness is I kind of think we're programmed not to wake up to try to figure out how to get out. That we're programmed to stay in. And to stay in and work harder and then do more good things. But we're all doing it within the Minotaur's maze, which means inevitably the Minotaur is going to find you unless you take out the Minotaur. And that's not what we're trained to do, and it's probably not what we want to do.
So that's actually leads me to where I was thinking of, like, so opposite of fear, or the opposite of love is not hate, it's actually fear. And so as a emerging, aspiring liberation theologian, I think about love as a lot as like a place to come from, as like a place of inspiration, like something that grounds you. And last night, Maisel, you said that our movements lack defense and security strategies or tactics, that we don't have infrastructure or apparatus to protect and respond to violence, force, or harm. Therefore, we are unprepared for our current moment or to rebel. And so my dear comrade, Jordan Jones, whose sister Kennedy is in the back, Jordan will often say this really interesting question: can you lovingly throw a brick? Which begs the question of how do we better understand your embrace of agape or revolutionary love?
Yeah, so agape is something I learned about in seminary, and the reason I went to seminary, I think we talked about this, I was in Nairobi, and I was sitting on the baobab, is that how you pronounce it? Under those huge, I mean, that's a gift from the deity, right? And I had been organizing, and I was like assigned to Angela, and like, so I'm rolling with the communists and internationalists, and I said this before, I was like such a little whiner, but I'm a soldier. I was trained like by soldiers, so you just do the task. But I was like, why aren't we in Nairobi for this Union Decade on Women thing? And why are we like gotta get on a bus and go to this compound? And then it dawned on me, you know, I was watching the brothers, they had dreadlocks, they were wearing camouflage. And I was like, oh, I get it, because all the women in this compound are the leadership of resistance and rebellion. The PLO women were there, Palestinian Liberation Organization. The ANC women were there. The SWAPO women from there, FMLA. All the women who were leading the resistance against colonization and colonialism, devastation of lands, the killings, right, that the CIA was engineering. We were all in the same compound. We couldn't be in a hotel in the city because of vulnerability of their deaths. I was a nobody, I was a grunt, I was assigned, you know, just make sure everybody's okay, etc., etc. And it was for me, I'm going the long way to understand this. It's only when I get a snapshot of reality that is not everyday reality that I wake up and I'm like, oh, I get the play of the state. Like, I can't be in a hotel in Nairobi because I'm assigned to Angela, make sure Angela's okay, everybody's okay, I'm expendable, not a problem, I'm only 20, nobody cares, that's my job, right? But then, could somebody just take out all these women? And yeah, they would, if they could. Maureen Reagan was the head of a women's delegation, daughter of, you know, President Ronald Reagan, who like gave you the death squads and all this other stuff, right? So this is the way I think about academia now, because I'm like probably the oldest person in the room. There's different ways in which my brain turns on and I see a snapshot of reality that is never talked about in our social or political organizing. Does that make sense? And that's why, like if I'm saying Geronimo did 27 years, framed for killing a woman with, you know, her husband was shot too on the tennis courts, and he was actually at a Black Panther meeting, not in Southern California where the shooting was, but he was in Oakland, and he told everybody in the party not to testify that G was in Northern California, not Southern California, could not have done the shooting. He was framed by the FBI, but the Oakland Panthers agreed because Geronimo was a revolutionary. Do you see where I'm going with this? I'm not just talking about the nonprofits. This has always been in our movements forever, because it's in every movement. There's a contradiction when people say, we can't go that far. We'll say we're revolutionary, but we're going to perform like a revolution. But if a revolutionary really makes a move, we're going to cut him off at the knee. So you have G, who's supposed to go underground to the Black Liberation Army. You have him do 27 years, and then later he'll get like 1 million plus whatever. You have Kathleen Cleaver fleeing, And the Harlem people I know, they're in this dispute with Huey because he's sending death squads to kill him on the East Coast, right? So what we face is formidable. It is not just the intrusion of the state, it is our own contradiction about being free. I'm not sure we actually like revolutionaries. But we're using that language all. I was a Panther. I was like, I can be snarky as hell, right? But it's just, it's the frustration. Because even when I'm talking to the people in the party, and I'm like, hey, they're like, no, don't write that. And I'm like, what do you mean don't write it? It's like factual. I'm a scholar. I'm supposed to like tell you what the deal is. It's like, no, let it go. And I said, well, will you say what the truth is and the contradictions? No, we're not saying anything. And I'm like, well, then how are we supposed to know what reality is? We're not supposed to know what reality is. We're just supposed to survive. And it's being in Nairobi, or it's being in Nicaragua during the war, it's going to refugee camp, it's meeting the Salvadorans. I know there's small people here, so they're metaphors. So we know what I'm saying. You know, like people have images on bodies and stuff. It's like talking to them. It's not like staring at, you know, what is left of them. It's understanding that Reagan's paying for it. It's understanding that my father, who dies as a lieutenant colonel, is at the School of the Americas, which is called the School of Assassins. It was the best years of my life, like running through flowers in what was the, you know, teaching desk. And so it's the contradiction. So when I meet the nonprofit people or I hear what they're doing, I'm not saying we have to have the same stories, but embedded in my head is stuff that I cannot unsee. I've already seen it. I've already been in war zones. I wouldn't fight in them, but I was there. So once it's in your brain, and then you're talking to academics who are reading books, and I do that too when I saw they were missing something when we were having tea, or, you know, something blew out, so they're holding the cup like this with, you know, knuckles. And it's like, I can't unsee that. And then I want to know, okay, then what do we see? We see what people tell us to see. That's essentially my read of what's going on, and it's been going on for the last decades. Like, people tell us this is a reality, this is how you struggle, don't mess it up, which means stay within the lines and the borders. And the people I know who like mess it up or cross over the lines and the borders, those people kind of disappear from being in those formations. But most people just don't want to talk about it. And I think because I think they're traumatized. So mine would have been, my father would have been, you know, traumatized. There were like, we would have cocktail parties. There would be John Coltrane and scotch and everything. The women would have pearls and silk dresses on. Everybody's black. Everybody's officer. And then they start, you know, like when you're a little kid and you just start eavesdropping what they do. They're making fun of their employer. But the employer paid for my braces and piano lessons. And they knew the cost, right? In Vietnam, 55,000 Americans, 2 to 3 million Vietnamese that you lose, right? Because the U.S. has tech. Same in Algeria, 20,000 lost French, about 1 million Algerians, right? The disproportionality. Gaza, the disproportionality, Palestine. It's the disproportionality. And then the reality is, okay, so what's the play? Aaron Bushnell made a play. Nobody talks about it. I don't think we're trained for horror, but we live with it all the time. And so I don't see how we get free, as people say. I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's really puzzling. It was simpler for me, like if you're running around with military people, They're just so simple. I mean, not simple, stupid, but their equations are so clear, and they get the outcomes that they want, which are, you know, horrible outcomes, but they have efficiency. And we don't want those kind of outcomes, but then I'm like, okay, so what's our equations? Who's doing the math or writing the script? And it feels like it's coming from up top. Even though people have all these brilliant ideas on the ground, like this singing, that was so organic. But if you're getting like millions, hundreds of millions, tens of millions, like in these like disbursements, it's really hard to get away from the bank. And the bank doesn't give money for freedom. I don't care what they say. They give money for good Negroes. Which is the irony, like John Coltrane, Scotch, like women, elegant women, like hit, you know, everything. Big houses, playing golf. And then none of them live long because they take themselves out. The state didn't take them out, they did it themselves. Contradictions are too deep.
Jesus. So this is my last question, my last statement, and I'm going to open up the floor for all your brilliance to shine. Is that okay? I'm going to make one more statement, one more question, and then I'm going to open up for everybody to shine and for your brilliance to shine a light in this room. Is that okay? Yes. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So in preparing for this conversation around your brilliant book, Confronting Counterinsurgency, clap for Confronting Counterinsurgency. I had to humble myself for so many reasons. Obviously, you're a genius. Two is I'm not as familiar and rooted in military science, right? So even the term counterinsurgency, really trying to get a grasp of what that means. So I got the U.S. Army and Marine Corps Counterinsurgency Field Manual, and I got some excerpts I want to read for folks. Matter of fact, before I even do that, raise your hand if you've heard the term counterinsurgency before. Okay, put your hands down. Raise your hand if you know what counterinsurgency means. Okay. Less hands, right? Listen, I had to read because I didn't know. So, in the Counterinsurgency Field Manual, the definition, it says, here's some things that it says. Counterinsurgency is not just a thinking man's warfare. It is the graduate level of war. Insurgency and counterinsurgency are complex subsets of warfare. Globalization, technological advancement, urbanization, and extremists who conduct suicide attacks for their cause have certainly influenced contemporary conflict. Insurgency and its tactics are as old as warfare itself. Joint doctrine defines an insurgency as an organized movement aimed at the overthrow of a constituted government through the use of subversion and armed conflict. Stated another way, an insurgency is an organized, protracted, political military struggle designed to weaken the control and legitimacy of an established government occupying power or other political authority while increasing insurgent control. Counterinsurgency is military, paramilitary, political, economic, psychological, and civic actions taken by a government to defeat insurgency. I'll run that back. Counterinsurgency is military, paramilitary, political, economic, psychological, and civic actions taken by a government to defeat insurgency. The modern era of insurgencies and the internal wars began after World War II. Many of the resistance movements against German and Japanese occupation continued after the Axis defeat in 1945. As nationalism rose, the imperial powers declined. Motivated by nationalism, communism, people began forming governments viewed as more responsive to their needs. The development of increasingly lethal and portable killing technologies dramatically increased the firepower available to insurgent groups. As important was the increase in the news media's ability to get close to conflicts and transmit imagery locally and globally. In 1920, T.E. Lawrence noted, "The printing press is the greatest weapon in the armory of modern commander." Again, in 1920, T.E. Lawrence noted, "The printing press is the greatest weapon in the armory of the modern commander." Today, he might have added, "and the modern insurgent." Though certainly the internet and compact storage media like cassettes, compact discs, and digital versatiles or DVDs have become more important in the years. Bringing it back to now times, I want to reference one of my favorite interlocutors, thinkers in my head, Antonio Gramsci. Marxist theorist and activist Antonio Gramsci, in his prison notebooks, he was imprisoned by Mussolini's fascist regime and offers insight with the quote, "The old world is dying, the new world is struggling to be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid systems appear." So Joy, how do we be honest about the times that we are in while avoiding the potential of domesticating or normalizing these morbid systems? Where can we find hope as empire collapses? We fight the system while fighting for our lives and avoid tearing each other apart. What does it mean to embody the famous quote by Gramsci, to have pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of important literature that we can revisit, Gramsci, prison notebooks, Fanon. So, I mean, just the historical framework that you gave, right? So it would have been, I think, around 1945, the OSS, the Office of Special Services, that were fighting the Nazis. After World War II, morphed into the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. Three worlds. I mean, I write this in Contextualizing Angela Davis, the book. I talk about, I start in the preface, I'm in Moscow, I'm standing there, I'm looking at Angela on the platform. Gorbachev is somewhere around roaming, and Mugabe was one of the keynotes. And I kind of knew, like, without betting, that Angela wasn't going to be in the frontier, right? That she was going to be in the upper ranks and they weren't going to let her speak. And that's because Reagan had pushed Gorbachev into collapsing the Soviet Union. So when I read Contextualizing, it's like the three worlds, right? The colonial world, the European conquest, the second world, the Soviet world, and the third world, which is us, right? And it was the second world, the Soviets, that were supplying a lot of the materials, the medical training, but also the fighting, the military stuff that would allow the liberation movements in Asia, Africa, the so-called colored people, right? And the function of the CIA was that the colonial people would remain colonized, not by the Europeans so much, but by Americans. Because when Hitler decided to do the second front, to go over to the Soviets, and the Soviets lost 20 million people dealing with the Nazis, which is, you need to think the Soviets were changing the World War II, but we're not going to do that, right? What happens, though, is that the only powerhouse is going to be the U.S. because the war did not take place in the United States, right? It was going around the world. Besides, the bombings, right, of the ships, like in Hawaii and stuff. But this moment when we're so dependent on the second world to push through, we don't have the capacity because the counterinsurgency of the U.S. is formidable. And they also brought Nazis into the U.S.
That's right.
Because the Nazis knew, demonic little motherfuckers, but the Nazi, they understood like the torture and thing, like this is how you torture somebody. They understood like this is how you build the machinery and da-da-da. And so the U.S. is like, those are gifted people. So instead of like prosecuting them for war crimes, they brought them into the military intellectual apparatus. Your CIA is part Nazi. And that's when Gloria Steinem says, I only worked with the liberal wing. I was like, that's not real. And then when you look at it, say, oh yeah, that's real, right? And they could have a debate, right? And I don't have the bandwidth to like sugarcoat anything, so I don't care anymore. So part of it is because Gloria Steinem platformed the most famous black feminist while being a CIA agent. That is soft counterinsurgency. That is more dangerous than hard, because hard, hey, you just hit a drone strike on my people, so I know I have to flee from you or I have to fight you. But oh no, you platformed me in this foundation, in this magazine, and you allow me to have currency figures. You're my friend. We got into bed with the CIA because the liberals knew how to do their thing. And they were going to Yale and Harvard, and they were intellectuals, and they read the books too. Oh, James Baldwin is so good. It's just a whole... There's different ways to be captured. There's hard counterinsurgency, there's soft counterinsurgency. There was no way... We lost the liberation battle at a point because we agreed to soft capture. So when Nelson Mandela shares a peace prize with de Klerk, who is running a killing machine, when Chris Hani, the only person who could defeat Mandela in an election, is blown up on his front lawn, and the ANC are the only people who know where he lives, right? We agreed to compromise in order to live long. And what happens is that we cursed our children and grandchildren with the future of always being prey. So we have to undo what we did. But the nonprofits will tell you to stay on the right course. And the Soviets, Gorbachev, I'm not a fan of Putin at all, right? I'm not a fan of Stalin. But what Gorbachev did was to collapse, and so the Third World, I'll give you just one anecdote and I'll stop. When I was running with the Communist Party women, which is how I met the key people in the CPUSA, including Shirley Mitchell, who's brilliant, and he trained me for a minute, and she's the one who mentored Angela and brought Angela into the CPUSA. And she was in Harlem, and I was in New York City getting my doctorate, so, we would talk and do different things. I'm trying to figure out how to, maybe I'll just shorten it more. What I think is really important is that we've been trained by some really brilliant people, and so we're grateful for that. But if everybody was compromised so that we would have longevity, that was going to have an impact on generations to come. And so we really are going to have to decide what longevity means to us. And if that's going to be a blessing to our grandchildren and children or a curse. Because if longevity means that we continue to mutate into loyalty to the state, then I don't see where our children and our grandchildren have a future that's viable. And I think what I was trying to think about in terms of the three worlds, we lost Chris Hani, and when I was in South Africa talking to doctoral students, and I was like, there's money, with the face of Mandela, everything, how come I don't see any, paper money with Chris Hani on it? They looked down the corridor, make sure nobody was in the hallway, and they said it's because the ANC took him out. And so we whisper reality. We already know what the contradictions, we know who betrayed who, everybody in here is smart, we already know it. We cannot publicly articulate anything that goes against the brand. And so then we become the brand. And that, I would rather be, I'm not special or anything like that, but I know a lot of people would just rather be kicked out or just be quiet or just stop talking. Now on the good side, that side. I have been blessed to see incredible, loving, and formidable people. So the agape, the form of love, which is not the love for your partner or your family, but it's the love of sacrifice and giving, that also becomes an inheritance. And I've seen that. I've seen that in the US, I've seen it in Brazil, I've seen it in Nicaragua, I've seen it on the continent, I've seen brilliance and beauty and bravery. But I also see the constant erasure of our memory, that we come from brilliance and bravery. And I just want to see us remember. So as I move to going out, it would be like a blossom of flowers. If it was just radiant, that we know who we are. And we know the people who fought for us, which is different from people who hire us and don't unionize and let us keep our jobs when we want to criticize them, right? So we all know the distinctions between capture and non-capture. And it's been really good to speak to you, and now I get to hear from you.
Give a round of applause for Dr. Lloyd James. Oh my God! I want to shout out to my dear friend, Michelle Thompson.
Oh, bless you.
Michelle is the person that actually put me on to Dr. James's work many years ago. And Michelle is I always say that she's like the bell hooks to my Cornell West. And she's
That's a good analogy, love.
deep, brilliant woman. And I'm so grateful for you, Michelle. Thank you for riding up here today from the DMV to be here. Please give a round of applause for Michelle. Okay, the moment you've all, or most, some, have been waiting for, Q&A. So, Alexander,
Yeah.
how are we gonna do Q&A? How you
I'm
wanna?
just gonna shout. Maybe get 2 or 3 questions at a time, and then do the
Okay.
routine thing.
Okay. So, you know what to do. Raise your hands. We'll call on you, and we'll take it from there. We got 1 hand. We got 2 hands. Do we have 3? All right. So we're gonna start. Is 3 at a time cool? 3, 1.
Can you repeat the question?
The question. Any question you have for Dr. James?
No, when the person speaks and you repeat the question. For the
repeat
audience.
like the people's mic thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. My friend.
Dr. James, in the beginning of your talk, you said that one of the worst things, or probably the worst thing we could do in the context of martyrdom is lie to each other and lie to ourselves. And I'm wondering what and how you define truth then, and in that context. I also wonder if there's any such thing as a mentally healthy revolutionary.
Obviously not. Yeah, how do you define truth? That's what you asked, right? Okay, so that's very tricky, because I can't definitively, I don't have the magic wand, and I'm not like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. Like, I'm not engineering reality or the definition of norms, right? I trust us to know the truth inherently. Now, and I also agree as humans, that we lie publicly. And maybe sometimes we lie to ourselves. I mean, obviously that helps get you out of the bed and keep you in the job and keep you to show up. I think the material reality is a check. And I start to distrust people when every time I see a defeat or a harm and they have an explanation of why that's going to be, it's not going to be a big deal. And I'm like, okay, so what's the safety perimeter? So, a short example, right, is I was asked to speak at an insurrection conference at University of Michigan, and then I was going to talk about the Revolutionary Love book, in Atlanta. And then, so the doctoral students say, well, when you go to Atlanta, Tortuguita was shot, multiple times, 50 plus wound, right? Can you go meet with the forest protectors? And I said, of course, and I didn't even know much about, they were schooling me. This is, it's always turned something into a text. But anyway, when we got there and we were like having tea, because you couldn't go in the forest anymore because the troopers and the cops had like put the wire around, everything. And so there was a young, I don't know their gender pronouns, but presented as a young sister, had just come back from Europe meeting with the anarchists, and they had asked, what is your security perimeter? Because your person that you love just went out when they were sitting cross-legged, meditating, and the troopers rolled up and just, made all the holes, right? And I was listening to her and I said, yeah, so what did you say to the anarchists in Europe? And I said, I didn't know. I said, okay, so let me ask you the question here, like you're back in the States. What is your security apparatus? And we write about it a little bit in here. They didn't have one. And yet again, like I grew up in ROTC, like the whole thing is self-preservation for a predatory state. I understand the contradiction, but you have to be able to be alive to have a function, right? And then I was like, why, you saw how when Tortuguita went out, right? Tortuguita went out.
On their knees.
How?
On their knees.
Yeah, and they had no tech. There was nothing, And the troopers were all exonerated. They said it's self-defense, right? And so the loss of the life was horrific, but what's starting to be in my mind very disturbing is that there was no strategy to minimize the loss of life. And I was like, well, your life is worthy of, some longevity here. So do you have a plan? And it felt like a plan was forbidden. And I always started to feel like, watching academic abolition, from early on, because I was there, like the beginning thing, and then I pulled back. This was forbidden to even talk about self-preservation because everything was going to be fine. Like if you actually think there's a threat, you're saying, no, this is not going to go well. So we have to plan. And I think it's easier to do it around DV You know, Marissa Alexander, what was her name? Right. So she just did a shot, you know, in the air. Maybe she doesn't do that in front of children, but anyway. So she got to do time. We can explain that in a private family thing. You know, because people using tech on each other or something like that. But we're not doing it in a communal collective. And I saw that moment where everybody was like on the firing range doing whatever. You know, I guess this was around 2014 or 2015. It was sort of like, let's Black people go to the range and stuff. And I kind of, again, I wasn't startled by it because I grew up in ROTC and I grew up with guns. I grew up in Texas and on the military bases. It wasn't a big deal. But it felt in some ways it was becoming performative. Like, and also people could have a piece, but they didn't know what to do with it. Right? And I'm not advocating anything. I'm not saying you should have something, but I think there's a mystification around violence, and that means there's a mystification around self-defense. And if you're gonna, like, at least King was honest. He's like, you know, Bayard Rustin told him to take all the guns out of the house. He said, I got 4 little kids. He said, no, this is gonna be a spiritual thing. Just get rid of it, and he did. But then he kept telling you how he was gonna go out. Different, you know, like you have the right to the message of the grassroots. He went out to, you know, Medgar Evers. It's kind of, you could say whether we have it or don't have it, if you've been a target, something's going to happen. But I think there's a preparedness around your mindset. Are you worth it? Are you really worth having a strategy that is about a material self-defense? And I believe that most of the non-profit and the academic, whatever, has told you that's forbidden to even talk about it. Because it's a bad look. The state doesn't want to hear that. And your funder doesn't want to hear it either. Sheesh. So, you know, this is... Every endeavor is going to be problematic. For the young sister, maybe it's her prayers that keep her safe, or maybe it was knowing that Tort went out that way, that people just started moving back some. I don't know. I can't really answer it. So I don't have the truth of anything. I don't have the definition of anything. I just have the experience of seeing some things. And I've met the people who, you know, Puerto Rican independentistas thought it was a good idea to play something that was going to blow, and it went off before they left where the package is supposed to be, right? They survived it, but not without fingers. So this is the thing I think about this culture. There's so much violence in entertainment. It's horror in the violence. It's just normative. And then you ask people in real time, real space, okay, what's the plan if somebody rolls out? And you're like, what? And I said, you've been watching all that X-rated, I mean, all that gore stuff. Get out, please. Like, you can watch that, but you can't plan. You don't have a family plan? You don't have a communal plan? So we absorb in the culture violence as entertainment. And then when it comes like, hey, you might need to figure out what to do, like real life self-defense, you can't function. You can watch horror shows, but you can't function and create a plan for self-preservation. That's brilliant. Whoever engineered a culture like that, they would just give you high on violence as long as you were a consumer, but not a practitioner, that's brilliant. That's capture.
Jesus Christ.
Why did you do that?
Next person, please step up to the mic so they can hear you outside. Come this way. Let's try it.
Thank you. Thank you. I often go back to your essay on the captive maternal And
The
it's
Womb of Western Theory.
yes, the Womb of Western Theory, and I read it, I reread it. It's gotten me through numerous things and numerous times, and it also makes me deeply resentful as I think of the care work that I do, and I'm always thinking of, is this being used and siphoned off by the state? And so I go about my day-to-day life, and sometimes I find myself withdrawing it. And so I wanted to ask you, is it possible for the captive maternal to withdraw the care work that sustains the state? And what happens? What does it look like? I've been enjoying doing it in very small ways in my own life.
Sabotage.
Yes. And that was my question.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I would say, so the Womb of Western Theory was actually written because there was an anthology on Foucault, sorry. And then I was like pissed with Foucault for different reasons, racial stuff. And then it's like, okay, let me see what I can do. And I started writing, and then it just being in Harlem and watching grandparents and parents and hustles and stuff like that. Education for kids, safety, keep them away from NYPD and stuff like that. But I will say, if this is where you're going, there is exhaustion. And with exhaustion comes resentment. And then the point becomes, that's why you had to see the captive maternal as stages. Like, you could stay on this level of care and just be consumed. And I've had people that I've befriended or let in and stuff like that, and then realized that they wanted me to be this super mom. And I was like, no, I mean, you're living here for free, that's as good as it gets, right? But then the rage that follows, then I'm the bad mother, right? And then we're gonna like slash you, and like, no, rhetorically and all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, everybody's upset. So what were your expectations of the captive maternal, that they would die by caring for you? Like, seriously? And I know we've done that, because we do it with children, you do it with aging parents. I've said before that your older brother is going to dump them some like bed bug, bullshit, in order to save money, and that there's all this like, there's a desire to care, and then you realize you're just being drained because there's nobody agreed to stop asking for care at a certain level. Then like, we got this much, okay, we need more. It's like, wait, I thought you were on your feet and you could care for yourself. Like, you're 30 something or you're in your 50s, like, come on, you could do it, right? And the truth of the matter is, maybe they could, but they don't want to. And so, like, in your caregiving, you have to decide if you have a succubi. I mean, are you like rolling with a vampire? Like, what's going on here? And I don't think we've established the boundaries for care. Like, do you get to enjoy your life? Or are you constantly caring? And I understand there are people with FREO, people neurodiverse, people, who are on heroin, there are people on LSD. And so everybody got their issues. I got it. But I'm starting to think I did not agree to deplete my life in order to enliven yours when you won't do the work to stabilize yourself. But the other thing is ego. Like, oh, I can handle this. I can prop you up. Like, I must be a good person because, like, free housing, hook you up with a job, da-da-da-da. And then it becomes like, okay, is this my ego manifestation that I'm so unworthy that it's only like if I'm drained that I know that I'm useful? And so that's why I have to go to the stages. And the stages is like, I wish you well. I'm moving into protest. Okay, I'm moving into movement. I'm moving into Maranaj. Which means that at some point you'll never see me. Because the Maroons aren't like, they're not pop-ups like take selfies, right? I mean, they pop up, they do their thing, and they go back down. And then when you get to Sanctuary, it is a way of disappearing. And I think I've settled, I'm okay if I disappear. This is for different reasons, it didn't turn out what I thought it would be in terms of caretaking. And it's okay. I mean, you learn by practice. I don't think it's enough, like we were talking, like when we were at the movie thing, amazing thing, at the documentary, we were like, we don't want to like mock mani-pedis, okay? Get ready to get one if you want one. But what does self-care look like? And if self-care has honor, you're going to transition into battle. It's inevitable. And that means you cannot take care of people who won't take care of themselves. Because then you can't go into battle. And the battle doesn't have to be one of aggression, it could be battle of defense. And you could try to explain to people, like, I'm moving towards this direction because whatever I can give, it is for the collective. But most of the people see care as individually given to them. And so their bitterness is because they didn't get what they thought was their due. That's a mani-pedi. It could be a mental health one, it could be I need money, I need a job, I need a hookup, whatever. The collective moves like water. But you shouldn't disappear as an individual, but to understand your place in the collective, you have to understand that you can't suction from other people. This is not a vampire relationship. Ask the collective, don't ask the individual. And the collective can't be stingy and, but the collective has boundaries. It's like, babe, you gotta get a job. I mean, it doesn't even have to be full-time, or maybe you just rake the leaves. You gotta do something. But the people who are wounded and abandoned, I just find this, they want the mother that doesn't even exist. Like the mother who could be drained. I mean, like in Toni Morrison's novel, she's in there, right? But in real life, what is the value of the mother? Like you always hate her because she doesn't ever give you everything. But do you understand? If she gave you everything, she would be off the planet. That's how it works. So you want everything, and you're going to take her out, but it's going to be her fault that she doesn't have longevity because she should have taken care of herself better. Well, she would have done it if she wasn't trying to nourish everybody. I would rather go militaristic than do that maternal stuff. Sorry, that wasn't I mean, I did it for decades, so, I mean, my mom's already transitioned, I mean, like, so, we would have to understand that life comes with death. It's the same quarter. Just adjust to it, and then maybe we have balance, and then we can be kind, and also in some ways self-sufficient.
Come, two more. Come. Where's my second one?
Ooh, is this on?
No. Oh, here. Go ahead.
Is this on now?
No.
I can
I don't know
also
if
just.
You want to check? Do you want this one?
I can yell.
It's on. It's on.
Wait, it's on now? No?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But yeah, thank you, Professor James. Yeah, this is like my maybe like third time seeing you speak in person. And I'm finishing up at one of your former plantations.
Which one?
I don't want to say, but
say.
the people might be watching. But I just want to say, start with that, just being very appreciative of how honest you are about the academy being an intellectual plantation. And I found myself at my own university, being ostracized for being honest about the fact that it is a plantation. I mean, it's named after a plantation owner, literally, after a slave master. So I just wanted to start with that, just gratitude for that. I guess I wanted to kind of think with you about the relationship between function, spirituality, affect, and certainty. And so this is something that I've thought about with Elder Alston a little bit, in the way that I guess, what is the function of spirituality? What is it actually supposed to do for us? And then what is the relationship between that and certainty? And then when we arrive at this place of certainty, what does it do for us as far as this feeling that it arises? And so I guess I just want to think about how the form of a lot of religious systems is this kind of, it's a redemptive form in search of a transcendent state of certainty, and which is actually kind of like consistent with Western thought. So then like you were trying to get at when we say things like we will win, in what ways is that actually refortifying kind of these Western, whereas like when we approach this place of honesty where, perhaps we might not win, but how much more radical is that political project when we actually are pursuing it, not knowing that we will win, actually. Like I think about Haiti, and I don't study Vodou, but I wonder what does that narrative form look like in Vodou, for example, but yeah. And then I guess just the last thing, a little bit about the thing about the secular in leftist spaces, thinking about like Fanon Black Skin White Mass with a prayer of make my body one that always questions, right? So this connection between spirituality, a constant uncertainty, and how do we use spirituality to navigate the abyss, to not try to come up for air. Yeah.
Or come up for air periodically.
But does it cost to come up for air even at that moment? And is that just something we have to calculate if it's worthy of that?
It costs to live.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
So, to be free, is, you can't measure the cost.
Golly.
I don't, so like, grew up in chapel on military bases, went to seminary, I don't always find comfort in the word as it's expressed in religious spaces. But I respect the word, right? Whatever the religions, you could, Thich Nhat Hanh, we ended up talking about Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist, priest who convinced Martin Luther King, right, to condemn the U.S. war against Vietnam. And all the religions are special, but all the religions are scary. Because when I think of the Rohingya and Myanmar and the Buddhists, the Buddhists are saying, no.
Yeah.
Like everything's going on because humans are engineering and controlling, right? I believe in the faith, but I can't define it, and I'm fine with that. I decided to stay on the planet. I had a choice. And I don't think it was because we were going to win I just decided that loyalty to life and loyalty to people and struggle, even if you wanted to leave, you have to stay. And I brought up Aaron Bushnell before, I don't quite understand the gift. It's a horrific gift to receive. But it is a gift that is actually profound. So there are ways in which life morphs into death, and death morphs into love. And I don't quite comprehend that.
Yeah.
And I can't always go to church or mosque to get a reading or a statement. But I know I have a function. And so I function faithfully until I die. And it is not on my terms, but it's not on the terms of people who drain you, because their fear is greater than their love. So they can't even love themselves enough to do what they need to center and then have the trek. And the trek is really inevitable that we will walk off this planet. We weren't supposed to stay anyway. So it's kind of the path that we walk while we're here. And I think it's very frightening, but it's very beautiful at the same time. So I can't really answer questions about spirit. I think in different ways that you become spirit, and then you don't have to explain it because people see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's enacting, not providing an answer as part of the practices, you know?
I don't think it's like you're withholding or we're trying to be mystical or anything like that. But I guess that's going back to the agape, that the love is sacrificial.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you need to be nailed on a cross or something, but it is inevitable that the world is being nailed up on a cross because of predators. So other people's pain becomes our pain. And then we decide how we can manage it and grow something out of it. And if that's as good as it gets, then that's as good as it gets. It's resistance. I would rather be in pain and awake than be drugged and pretending like this is a real life that is not entrapment in many ways, particularly if we're imperial blacks living in this friggin' zone. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. I want to talk to you after too, but thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Doctor. Good evening. I'd like to thank you for your musings and your time. I thank you for being good. Great. My fault. Every time I get kind of loud, people get kind of shudder. So, I think what I'm asking for advice, because I like the fact that you brought up the soft power and the hard power of counterinsurgency. I myself am an organizer in the city, and my comrades and I, we are attempting down the path of steeling ourselves to become the kind of proper cadre organization that we think is necessary in the business of making revolution. You mentioned George Jackson. As his younger brother Jonathan Jackson said, it is a great job of growing to do. The sooner begun, the sooner done. My comrades and I have found that we are surrounded by a particular breed of black organizer that tends to come from the petit bourgeois class and the academic class. And we ourselves are comprised primarily of wholly proletarian and lumpen proletarian sorts. So when you mention that there's this mystification of violence, that people make an aesthetic of violence, but when it gets come down to it, they're not willing to protect each other. And my comrades and I have found that we've become isolated because we are against the gravediggers of revolution. We are against people who are not willing to take that extra step. And because of that, we're a little too uppity for them, right? So I think my question in asking for advice is, if we're steeling ourselves to be the kind of people willing to take the necessary steps, and we find ourselves surrounded by those naysayers, how do we take it upon ourselves to, as you mentioned, make maroonage irresistible to the masses, to make militants of the masses?
Thank you. I try my best. I'm going to do the long way, and then you guys get to go home. So I was asked to go to Berea, Kentucky, after Bell Hooks transitioned to do a keynote. About 2 a.m, there was a knock on my door in the hotel, and I opened the door, and my mother came in, and the whole entourage asking for support and help and for me to do X, Y, and Z. My mother had died several years earlier, so it wasn't really my mother, but I was watching my mother and this whole group of people, and I was trying to explain, I can't take care of everything. And then somehow they dissipate or disappear from the room, and this becomes part of the keynote, because what started to work in my mind was there's the epicenter, right, and the hypocenter. The epicenter is the surface of politics, and that would, as much as people love Bell Hooks, I put her in the epicenter. And I remember when I was organizing around the Central Park case, how pissed I was with her and other feminists. because I met the mothers and was doing all this organizing. We were in a dojo in Brooklyn on defending the youth because it didn't make sense. Like you said, this doesn't make sense, but everybody wanted to be safe. Even though Trump put out the ad in the New York Times to bring back the death penalty, really just trying to kill Black and Latino kids who didn't do what they were charged with, right? So back to Barrera, I started talking about the epicenter and the hypocenter. The epicenter is the surface of politics, and we have good people who are really great on the surface of politics. You're talking about something different. The hypocenter is ground zero, it's underground. And I was like, you guys, people talk about Assata's daughter, Assata's whatever. You're turning Assata into like a t-shirt or a meme, because you would never do what Assata did, right? And I just say, like, cryptically, if you know Panthers, you can go to Cuba and you can sit in somebody's kitchen, and then they tell you what's more in the memoir, and it's much more serious, like what you're talking about, right? But people write in a way because they want people to read and feel comfortable, so people don't say everything. If you link the epicenter, the people who want to be safe when they organize and want to be ethical, and we say, we don't expect you to go to the hypocenter in the underground. You're not trained for it. You don't want to be there. It's not don't even try. But there has to be a linkage with the two. So that when the people who agree to take the risk, like Assata did, or the Harlem Panthers, those are the ones I know, Blob, Daruba Bin Mohad, like the people who did like serious time and who were fighters, right? You have to retrieve them. You can't leave them abandoned in prisons. You can't I'll just write an article about you or something for a next publication, or be adjacent to a Panther so I look edgy. It's like people want to project what you're talking about without doing the material. I don't know that people on the surface will be loyal to the people who go underground. My experience from what little I've seen from, if I know Harlem Panthers, they let me in a little bit and they'll tell me some stuff, it would be rare. Because my understanding from the Harlem people, they were willing to die. And the way they explained it, going back to John, his 17-year-old, it's almost like biblical, so loved his brother that he would allow his life to be taken and buy him one more year. And even the mother, Georgia Bia Jackson, understood that about her two sons, right? You can't make people agree to be militant. You can't make people agree to be fighters until the material conditions tell them that their lives are at risk as well. And then they mobilize. And then they can also betray you. I think, I could be wrong on this, I think it's about how you love. Like people who love enough that they would risk their formal freedom and that they would risk their lives. Some people think that they're foolish. I think that they have a capacity for incredible love and incredible loss. And again, I came out of the military. They risked their lives too, but they were fighting for the empire. But it was still going to be death either way. So the way I would wrap it, people fear death, people fear captivity, and people fear freedom. The cost of freedom in an empire. So if you can link the hypocenter with the epicenter, if we could stay in conversation, there's a possibility of mutuality that would provide some protection, but also insights. And timing is probably important. And I can't read time like that. I can't read the appropriate time of rebellion. I don't have capacity. But I've seen the people who did the time, and I've seen the people the way they loved, and they're surprised that they still are living in their 60s or 70s because they plan to be dead at 18 or 16. Like little Bobby Hutton. They're just the ones who got to live longer. But they know what you're saying. And that, I don't know if that's the comfort enough, but you're not crazy. But that's the thing about love. I think often we just want it in a container. We don't want too much love. Because when there's too much love, you do like a Mamie Till Mobley. You do some open casket funeral. You freak out the funeral guys, like, let me clean Emmett up. I know it's weird. And that was her war cry. Totally messed up everybody's psyche. Rosa Parks said she wouldn't give her busty because she was thinking of Emmett the photos. We always had Ida B. Wells. People didn't want to live next to her. But she'd be like, nah, we're done with lynching. Cripple the economy of Memphis by going to Britain and get the British white women to, block having people think she's a man and they were going to cut off her, testicles and stake her. And didn't know people in our communities who will go that far. George, John, Ida B. Wells, Malcolm. But I think we have to be in communication with the people who will not go that far. Because the only reason we would be doing that is because we love them. And I don't think they understand love like that. But we can learn. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Round of applause.
We've made these collective books, and again, all the revenues go back to community. And so we had to fight about this because they didn't want the cover. But this is a short, weird thing. But I was in London at ICA, and then I ended up meeting the person who's actually anonymous but runs things. And then this is another kind of way. You can always tunnel into a zone and get what you want to come out. And then you can disappear and never interact with wealthy people again, as long as you get a tangible. And I feel this art by C. Flex Singh that we had to argue about for weeks, if not months. You just need one person who would disrupt a psyche with this kind of image, and then know that we're not playing. And that's all they need to know, is we're not playing with them. This is how we live, how we die, and how we love. It's good to meet you.